All right, let's jump right in. We're about to take apart one of the single most influential and controversial ideas in the history of the Western world. It's a concept that has quietly shaped our laws, our culture, and even how we feel about ourselves: the idea of original sin. It all really boils down to this one huge question. Are human beings born essentially good, pure, a blank slate, or do we come into this world already carrying some kind of fundamental flaw? For centuries, this has been the debate. And trust me, the answer you land on changes, well, pretty much everything.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll ask, is it a flawed design? Then we'll look at the architecture of guilt itself. After that, we'll explore a totally different approach, the path of responsibility. We'll bring in a psychoanalyst to diagnose the mind's inner judge, and finally, we'll unpack the inherited burden we're all still dealing with.
Okay, first things first. What exactly are we talking about here? What is this powerful idea that's had such a grip on Western culture for so long? So the core concept is pretty wild when you stop and think about it. It says that because the first two humans disobeyed a rule, every single person born after them arrives in a state of sin. The key thing to get is that it's not about something you did, it's about what you fundamentally are. You don't just inherit the consequences, like having to die someday. No, you inherit the actual guilt. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think an idea this huge would be spelled out word for word in the Bible, right? Well, it's not. It's actually a theological construction, an idea that was built, piece by piece, like a building, over hundreds of years. So let's go take a look at the blueprints. In the early days, Christian texts talked about a fallen condition, sure, but this specific idea of inheriting guilt wasn't really on the table yet. The main architect here is Augustine of Hippo. He's the guy who pulls all the threads together, gives it the name original sin, and then defends it in a massive debate against a thinker named Pelagius, who argued we're born neutral. Well, Augustine won that debate, and by the 6th century, his view became official church doctrine in the West. So, how did he make his case? Well, this is the jaw-dropper. One of his cornerstone pieces of evidence was a faulty translation. The original Greek of a Bible verse said that death spread to all people because all sinned. Pretty straightforward. But the Latin version Augustine was reading said, "in whom all have sinned." That tiny change allowed him to argue that all of humanity was literally physically present inside Adam and sinned with him. An entire theological system built on the bedrock of a mistranslation. It's just incredible. And he wasn't done. He still needed a transmission mechanism. I mean, how does the sin get passed down through the generations? He identified it as something called concupiscence, a fancy term for disordered desire, but he specifically pointed to the messy, involuntary passion of sex. His logic went like this: since every human is the product of this act, every human is stained by sin from conception. And just like that, you can see how sexuality and shame got tangled up together for centuries to come. Now, from this one Augustinian root, things really branched out. The Catholic tradition kind of moderated the idea, saying baptism erases the state of sin, but the tendency remains. Eastern Orthodoxy rejected the whole inherited guilt idea completely, arguing we only inherit mortality, not the blame. And then many Protestant traditions actually doubled down, intensifying the doctrine into what's known as total depravity, the belief that every single part of human nature is corrupt. But here's the thing. Not everyone went down that road. The Jewish tradition, for example, offers a complete and total counter-narrative. It's a fundamentally different way of understanding human nature from the very beginning. And when you put the two systems side by side, the difference is just staggering. On one side, you have inherited guilt. On the other, innate purity. In one corner, a corrupted nature. In the other, a nature that contains two competing inclinations, one for good and one for evil. One system says you need external grace to be saved. The other emphasizes personal action and your own responsibility. The Jewish process for dealing with sin is called teshuvah, which means return. And look at these steps. It's an active, do-it-yourself repair process. You have to recognize what you did, feel true remorse for it, stop doing it, confess, and then make a real commitment to change. The power to make things right is in your hands. It's a framework built on agency, not on inheritance. Okay, let's completely switch gears for a minute. We've talked theology, we've talked history. Now, let's put on our psychoanalyst hats. What if we read these religious stories not as literal history, but as profound, symbolic maps of the human mind? This is where it gets really fascinating. So, you've got a few different theories here. For Freud, guilt is that constant war between our primal urges, the id, and that internalized parental voice, the superego. For Melanie Klein, it starts even earlier, in infancy, when we feel remorse for aggressive fantasies about the people we love and need. For Lacan, it's just a built-in part of becoming a person and entering a world of language and rules. The main point is, for them, guilt isn't inherited from Adam. It's just part of our psychological makeup. From this point of view, the story of original sin isn't about ancient history at all. It's a powerful myth. It's a symbolic drama that encodes deep truths about our relationship with authority, our complicated experience with desire, and that sense of loss that comes with growing up. In a way, it's a story we all live through.
So let's bring it all home. Why does a theological fight from the 5th century still matter today? Because whether we know it or not, this idea has left a profound and often very heavy legacy on our modern world.
Anthropologists talk about something called a guilt culture. This is a society where what keeps you in line isn't public shame, but an inner voice. And many argue that the doctrine of original sin was a key engine in creating this in the West. By saying the problem is inside you, your very nature, it helped create an intense, self-monitoring conscience. We all became our own inner judge, perpetually on the lookout for our own flaws.
And on an individual level, the psychological toll can be huge. If you truly believe you were born bad, that could just gut your self-worth and create this constant humming anxiety. That deep link between sin and sexuality we talked about, it can lead to all kinds of shame and repression. And in more extreme cases, it can actually contribute to serious mental health issues, like religious OCD, or even what is now being called religious trauma.
So we are left with this incredible paradox. For millions and millions of people, this doctrine is the key to everything. It's theologically essential. But at the exact same time, there's a compelling case to be made that it carries a very real and very heavy psychological cost.
And that really is the final thought. An idea built over 1,600 years ago and propped up by a mistranslation went on to fundamentally shape the emotional and cultural world that we all still live in. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the powerful and visible ideas that are shaping your world right now?